To
Yes,
record
we just
these so that,
all be informed that we're being recorded.
yeah. No, that's okay. So if you've got something sensitive, obviously you could turn off your camera. You could let me know, and I could pause the recording as well. But generally, a lot of the topics that I end up discussing on my Ask Me Anything lives are really relevant to most people in the online space. I deal with a lot of experts, coaches, consultants, so there's a lot of overlap. But really happy to see you all today. And let me also open the chat. If anybody is in a place where they're not able to talk, but they want to pose a question, I'd like to make sure I've got my eyeballs on chat as well. So who'd like to go first? Anybody?
I'll go
Anybody?
first. I'll
Awesome.
go
Hi,
first. It's
Kathleen.
Kathleen. Hi.
Hi
Yeah,
there.
I was just chatting and saying that we were on the road and just got back late last night, so I'm having a late breakfast, and I was going to hide my camera, but I'll ask my questions first. Question about my business with regard to proprietary. I'm a clothing designer. I'm also a money coach, so I have
Oh,
two things.
congrats. Yes.
Um, so I have patterns, proprietary digital patterns,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a sole proprietor. And I'm wondering, how do I go about um, what's the word? I just had it.
Yeah, like
It's not
protecting your
legacy.
work.
No, not protecting it, but
Mm.
turning it over to somebody else. I want to sell the patterns at some point, and
Oh, got
what's that?
it.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Like,
I
and
know
are
that
you
if I
talking
were
about, no, are you talking about like business planning and like actually transferring your
succession.
business succession,
Yeah, and
or
mostly with regard to the patterns,
with
because
regard to the IP? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, some things to think about in regards to intellectual property is that, one, you want to really, and you probably do really know the marketplace. You might have some people that are really primed and ready for that kind of digital
I do.
asset, right?
I do
Yeah.
actually. I've got designers who have a similar look that if I, if I
Okay.
died tomorrow, they will get them if they want, but they
Got
for the right
it.
price.
Right, right. Yeah. And the other thing is, understanding, like really doing, I call it an intellectual property asset inventory, right? So you can literally
Yeah.
sit down and create a spreadsheet and document everything that you have, right? Is it just patterns? Do you have are there other assets in your business that you should be looking
Yeah.
at, whether there's business systems or a
Yeah.
sales technique or, and I don't know the full extent of your
Hmm.
business, Kathleen, but starting with an IP asset inventory can really help
Hmm.
people kind of wrap their heads around what all do they
Hmm.
have. Are there parts of their business that they're not looking at that may have
Hmm.
some value? And
Hmm.
then really, in regards to, especially for small businesses, in regards to the transfer of that IP, you obviously would want that well documented. What
Yeah.
is it? What is the IP asset that's being transferred? Is it being described appropriately?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And having basically a purchase and
Yeah.
sale agreement in place for those assets
Hmm. Hmm.
with the proper language that completes that transfer.
Hmm.
So it is about getting the right documentation in
Yeah.
place to support that. But
That.
it starts with having the right people involved first, right? So
Right. Right.
because no documentation is going to save you from just a
I
bad
know.
transaction or doing
Yeah.
business with the
Really.
wrong person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's actually what I kind of knew that was the answer, but because it's been in the back of my head, and I thought document.
totally.
So I've got to go into my look at, because my patterns evolve and they get tweaked and whatever.
Yeah.
So for whoever takes over, they need to see what the current ones are. So
Totally.
okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
And if, depending on how your current patterns are used or sold in the marketplace, right? Because if you're talking about, because there's obviously the business succession, the business planning side of
Hmm.
this, but there's also what happens if there's infringement before that, right? So is there potential infringement of your IP where somebody else somehow gets their hands on or has access to your digital patterns and is in some way, capitalizing on that or selling them or doing something in the marketplace that would actually harm the value of your IP asset in the future, right? Because you'd need to be taking enforcement actions if there was any kind of infringement going on. And that's usually a question of understanding your marketplace, knowing where your exposure is. And then, from there are some strategies that can help you protect your current use of that IP, right? And so that's a little bit of a different conversation. So for example, with your patterns, if I don't know if you currently offer them through online sales or downloads, if you're
No,
Okay, got
it's
it.
none of that. I thought that, but no,
Okay.
it could morph into that, but
Got
no,
it.
right now, no.
Okay. Because whenever you're talking about the future sale of a current asset, you have to also think about, is it being infringed? And if not, if you don't have exposure in the marketplace and you know that it's still proprietary and hasn't been utilized, in the wrong way, that's a little different than a lot of people in the information space who are putting their information, including some of their proprietary systems, out there, right? If you're going to sell something as a future asset, it means you also have to really have plans in place to protect it and keep it safe. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
good question,
All right.
Kathleen.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Good to connect with
Okay.
you.
Yeah, you too. So I'm going to have my breakfast now. Thanks.
Totally. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Enjoy. Happy late breakfast. Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Welcome to Robert and Scott. Who else can I support? Scott, good to see you. Why don't you unmute and say hello?
I was going to say, it seems like forever since we saw each other last.
I know, right? We got to hang out so long ago. It feels like years. When was it? It was a couple years at least. Down there. Yay, Charlotte's back. Down there at JV Launchpad.
Yeah.
That was fun. That was a good spot. Hi, Charlotte. So, Scott, how have you been? How can I support you today?
Thank you. And by the way, I'm still getting good responses from those headshot photos that you did back then. So,
Oh, I'm so happy. My past life coming to play and be able to support you. That was fun.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it was your photography. It was not the subject matter. It was your
Whatever. You hush up. I tell you what, all people need is a good photographer to bring out their best, but that was easy for you.
That was cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great questions.
Yeah.
Pick which one or whichever you want to work with, if you're okay. I'm looking at coining a few words. Like I primarily work with high achieving women entrepreneurs. So one of the words that keeps coming up is about her high achieverness gets in the way, or whatever. And high achieverness is not actually a word. Just as an example, is there a way to coin that, trademark it, protect it?
Yes. Great question. So the answer is yes. So for example, and by the way, leading brands and leading, thought leadership, folks in the thought leadership space, authorities, they do this. They create their own language to describe, certain concepts and describe what you're doing. So it's a really powerful thing to do if you can do it well. So one is you can begin using it, right? So people often get very hesitant around putting something like that out into the marketplace because they think, oh, somebody will steal it or whatever. But the reality is that even in the trademark system, the US trademark system, the ability to get a mark often relates back to first use in commerce. And so when you have an idea like this, you generally don't want to sit on it because one, often ideas that are similar evolve around the same time. Somebody else could be having a similar idea and about to, and so you do want to be first to the marketplace with it. And if you have the budget to achieve a trademark, that's a really solid strategy for letting the marketplace know. Because, if you are anticipating filing for a registration, a trademark registration, you can use that little TM symbol right after the word that you plan to use as a mark to let people know it's proprietary and you either are shortly intending to obtain a registration or you already have that process underway. So what we would do, what I do for my clients, and by the way, the more unique a word is, the more likely it is to be protectable, right? So not everything can be protected through the trademark system. And it's why companies like Starbucks or Nike. Like, you don't use those words unless you're actually referring to that company. They're not just in the dictionary or in our everyday lingo, right? So a word like high achieverness or whatever your word was is good because it's not in our everyday lingo. It does make it more protectable. That said, for anybody that, you know, that I support with a trademark registration, we always start the process off with what's called a knockout search, where we do, and I have a team member who supports me in this, we do a series of searches to make sure that there's not anything that looks like that in the marketplace that would prevent you from getting that mark. And so yeah, exactly. So the knockout search is kind of like your due diligence before we proceed with, you know, spending your money for the USPTO and for our services to make sure that as much as possible, we look at the marketplace and we go, yeah, you've got a really fair shot at obtaining this mark. And so that knockout search is normally a $300 search fee on its own, takes care of our time and then consultation time with you to review the results. But that gets folded in if we do that search and we look at it and we say, yep, thumbs up, you've got a good shot at this, and you proceed, that fee just gets folded into my regular trademark registration fee, which is $14.97 for a single mark, single class. And so what it means is you don't pay separately for that knockout search if you proceed to registration. Now, if you don't, we still have to collect that fee for our time to do that search, but you get one additional search for free. So if you've got a backup, you've got another tagline, another phrase that you like to use, we can support you by doing a search for that and applying that knockout fee to a separate registration if you're ready with a second one.
Okay, two things in relation to that. One is, can you at what point can you use the TM? Like, you're planning to do this. At what point is it okay to use the TM? And the other part was, should you go ahead and be trying to get a domain name with that to sort of prove that you were, you know, whatever you started using it?
Yeah, great questions. So you want to use the TM if you are basically planning to, in a fairly immediate fashion, seek protection of that mark. So some people will be like, oh, they just throw up TM and they sit on it for a while. Don't do that. The TM, you really need to signify that you intend and are either, like, you know, shortly or already underway with proceeding towards registration.
Okay. I know if the application had to be started before you could start using the TM.
No. So, like, you know, if you are like, okay, Heather, this all makes good sense. That sounds like it's within my budget. I might, you know, take a few weeks to get finances in order or whatever. I would say go ahead and start using that TM. But if you're like, oh, I might get around to this in 2 years, like, probably, you know, for me, that would be a risk because you would be using it all that time without proceeding for a registration. And in the meantime, other people in the marketplace are getting exposed to it. And if they see that you don't have an application pending, it can cause some real problems, right?
Okay, that's why I was debating and delaying using it because I wasn't sure when the right timing would be.
Totally. It's a much stronger use of the TM if somebody sees it and they go look at the USPTO and they're like, oh, yeah, there's an application in line for this. They're probably not going to try to interfere with your rights.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're welcome.
Sort of align with that, I want to start an LLC. Mm-hmm. Is it better to be a creative name? Is it better to go after the domain name first? Or how do you figure out if the LLC name is available before you go after a domain name?
Good question. So all of these questions have to do with your initial search efforts, right? And by the way, this is a fabulous question, and especially for anybody watching the recording. If you are getting ready to start a business, if you're getting ready to pursue a trademark registration, right, a registered mark, you want to do really solid searches in advance. And what that looks like, what I tell my clients to do is, one, you want to start with a Google search, right? We all know the Google. You want to spend lots of time on there poking around and not just searching the exact phrase or name. You want to do slight variations of it because, like, so for example, there was a podcast name that one of my clients wanted to get a registration around. We went and searched, and it's not the exact use, but like you flip the order of the words, change one from present tense to past tense or whatever, Ooh, there was another podcast that looked really similar. So you got to like use your creative brain when you're searching to be like, okay, what other variations on this theme could there be that I need to look at to make sure that nobody else has a similar enough use that's already registered that I could be prevented from use, not only prevented from using my version, but that you might actually be infringing their rights by using your version. That's what you want to stay away from. So lots of time on the Google, look at variations on the theme, whatever the word or phrase is, like, play around with that language and those words and do different searches. And then you want to do a state level search. So you're talking about business formation. You want to get into, and are you, Scott, remind me where you're based. You're East Coast?
Yeah, East Coast, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So you'd want to go to the Pennsylvania Secretary of State and do a business corporation search for that name or similar versions of it, right? Yep. So because business registrations are state level, and then you can go to the USPTO and do the basic trademark search. It's called TESS. The database is called TESS, and search for, again, that word or variations on that word. And that's federal level. That's to find out who is using this and is getting a federal level registration that could be used across, interstate lines and sometimes even internationally. So, those are kind of the different level searches. Now, if you were being super thorough, you would go look at all 50 state databases and registrations for state level businesses. Right. But a lot of people don't do that because you might have, and by the way, when it comes to business formation, we've got two separate conversations going on. The name of the business, so if you're starting an LLC or a C Corp versus a brand strategy, what are you going to be known for in the marketplace? So for example, my Legal Website Warrior branding, right? And I've got a trademark around the name Legal Website Warrior. But my business, even though people know me as Legal Website Warrior, that's a DBA. That's not the actual name of my entity, right? My business formed at a state level. So you can have different names. You can have your business be called, 905 Media or whatever, and your brand name be something totally different. Does that make sense?
And then it'd be separate markings and filings for both.
So it would be a formation document that labels. So for example, one of my really well-known clients, his business is like 418 Media LLC, totally nondescript. You wouldn't look at that business name and go, oh yeah, I totally know who that is. No, it's designed intentionally to be a little bit nondescript, right? Yeah, because the other thing is from a liability perspective, not that somebody couldn't ultimately track you down, but if your business name is the same as your branding, from a liability perspective, it makes the searches much easier, right? And if you want somebody trying to deliver service of process to you for legal proceedings, you maybe want to make it a little bit harder for them to actually find you. Again, not that they couldn't ultimately do it. There are ways that, they can search Scott Brown and find out if he has state registrations and all of that. But I often, as a strategy, will set up... Okay, sweet pie, mommy will be there in just a minute, okay? Set up state level businesses that are totally different than somebody's brand strategy and what they actually want to be known for. And so the branding, like mine, like Legal Website Warrior, I have a federal level registration. And by the way, you can get state level trademark registrations as well. That is going to be a strategy that mostly applies to brick and mortar businesses that are really limited by geography, by state lines, etc. Right? So for most of my clients, that strategy is a less successful strategy than going right for the federal registration because they're doing business online, they're doing business in all 50 states, or at least they want to be, or internationally, right? So the federal level registration is where you can go for some additional brand protection, right? Because you're registering a trademark that hopefully will protect a brand name. Hi, Kathleen. Good to see you again. So does that help you, Scott? Does that help you understand kind of the different, it's like layering on, right? You layer on different strategies depending on what your end goal is.
That helps. That puts more meat on the bones, so to speak.
Totally. Yeah. And it also gives people more freedom in their naming of their business, because people can really get caught up on that point of like, oh, I'm creating an LLC. What do I name it? Right. And you can have it be nondescript. You could have it be, something kind of bland, Scott Brown Consulting or whatever, and then have a totally different brand name that you register as a DBA. And what a DBA is, anybody here heard of a DBA? Or it can be sometimes a fictitious legal name. It's a way to connect the dots for your state, usually your Department of Revenue, also the IRS, to say, here are the names I'm doing business under, right? So if you are going to create Scott Brown Consulting LLC, that's your LLC. And then maybe you have this other brand name that you just need to connect the dots to that LLC. That's where you register a DBA. Right. It lets people know, lets the state know, lets other government organizations know this is a name I'm doing business under. And then you actually attach it to your LLC.
Is there real filing involved for a DBA, or is that pretty simple?
It's pretty simple. I mean, in some states, it's like literally a $5 fee. Others, it's like a $15 or $20 fee to register a DBA, because you're doing a big service to the state, letting them know, here's one of the names so for example, if you're a sole proprietor, let's pretend you're Bob Green Plumbing and you actually don't even have an LLC set up, but you want to do, suddenly you want to do your plumbing business under Go Green Plumbing, right? You would register that DBA because it's no longer just his name, which is traceable. Go Green Plumbing could, really mean anything not related to a name. DBA is the appropriate way to let the state know and, the IRS know that through your state registrations, that's a name you're doing business under. Right? So DBAs are really common. Lots, if not most businesses have them. And it's part of usually your state licensing process. You just click a box like, are you going to add a DBA? And then you fill it out.
Hey, that's cool. Okay. I did a DBA back in the 70s when I first got into business.
Yeah.
And you just did it, and you didn't have to file, you didn't do anything back then.
And some people do that even now, and it's not the right way to do it, but it's because a lot of people don't understand local and state licensing procedures. And so often, like, let's pretend you're somebody that goes to LegalZoom. I'm not promoting this, but people do it, and they set up their business like an LLC through LegalZoom. They often skip some steps. LegalZoom is not coaching you through the process, and they often will throw a lot of things into the bucket that you don't need. And some of the things they won't take care of that you do need, like local business and state licensing, usually required by cities, sometimes counties, sometimes a state. Like in Washington here, we have what's called a master business license. So you create an LLC in Washington, one of the first things you have to do is get a master business license, and then you can apply for your local licenses as well. And your city is going to be collecting things like, B&O tax, your occupational taxes, the things that helps the city operate, right? So a lot of people end up making missteps on the licensing. So I always like to make sure people understand that those requirements are there. They need to take care of it. And usually you can just do some quick Googling and, Google your city license requirements, Google your state license requirements. And if you're having any problems, like call the state clerk, right? Or call somebody that can help walk you through the process. Usually there's contact information on those state websites. But it's a really important part of the process. The thing that happens if you don't get that right is that the city could catch up with you after 10 years of being in business, and then suddenly you owe 10 years of back taxes, which is really painful.
Cool. Thank you very much. This helps a lot.
Good. Well, congrats. I'm so happy to see you here, Scott. Pipe in again if you've got another question. All right, Charlotte and Robert, you guys have been really patient. And hi, Kathleen. Welcome a little late. But Charlotte, have you got a question?
I actually want to ask one in line with what you were just discussing with Scott, and that has to do with the sole proprietor versus LLC. So I'm set up as an LLC, but as a sole proprietor LLC. But I recently learned that maybe some things, I actually had a state agency say that my DBA was actually my name, but not my business name because of my LLC sole proprietor status. So I was wondering about what do I need to do to switch so that it isn't me that's liable, but versus my business.
Well, and this is a great question. I think what you're probably saying, and without looking at the paperwork from your, whatever local or state agency you're talking about, I'm not able to advise you on this. And across the board, my disclaimer, which I should have started with, is I can't give legal advice in a group setting like this. But, if I had a client here in Washington come to me with one of these issues, I would walk you through the process of what I would talk to them about. So what you want to look at, most LLCs in most states are considered, and what you're talking about, I think, is tax treatment status. So when you go to form an LLC, you can actually make a tax election about how you want that LLC to be taxed. Do you want it taxed as a partnership? Do you want it taxed as a C corporation? Do you want it taxed as an S corporation? You've probably heard of S corp, right? S corporation actually isn't a legal entity. Some people will come to me and say, I want to set up an S corp. Even though the lingo out in the marketplace makes people think it's a separate entity, it's not. It's actually a tax election status. So you're either setting up an LLC or a C corp, and you're making an S corp election for tax treatment. And that's how you, quote unquote, set up an S corp. So what you're talking about is most LLCs, you are taxed. It's called pass-through taxation. If you're a single member LLC, the presumption in most states, not all, but in most states, is that you are being taxed as an individual. Now, what this means is that your LLC still creates liability protection. So let's be clear that if you have properly set up an LLC with your state, you do have liability protection, which is the whole point of setting up an incorporated business, right? So you don't need to worry about that so long as you've set it up the right way and you maintain proper records the right way and you do your annual filings, right? Those are pretty straightforward, but there are some things you have to do to maintain that liability protection. That said, when it comes to taxes, you do have what's called pass-through taxation. And what this means is that let's say you make, $80,000 in your LLC the first year, you're taxed on the individual level. So you're taxed on your 1040C, reporting that $80,000 as income. You also have some self-employment taxes, right? Because of the LLC setup. And even as a sole proprietor, you would have self-employment taxes. So that's what it means for the individual taxation, right? But the liability protection is still there. The liability protection, by setting up an LLC, a limited liability company, you are letting people know my business is here, my personal assets and personal life are over here, right? So again, without looking at the documents sent to you by your local or state agency, and I'm guessing that maybe there was just a mistake made with the DBA. If you're using your individual name in business as a sole proprietor, you actually don't need to file a DBA. You're entitled to do business under your individual name. So that could have been the mistake if you filed a DBA using your individual name.
I didn't. They actually made me, when they did the paperwork, they defaulted to using my name instead of my business name.
Oh, got it.
Sole proprietor LLC.
Oh, interesting. So they also wanted your individual name listed as a DBA. So, what state are you based in, Charlotte? Texas. Yeah. So, and if you need a referral, like if there's something to sort out there, because I don't know if you corrected that already, or if you need additional support, I could get you connected to a Texas attorney. Sounds like a pretty simple thing to sort out. But in most states, like I said, the LLC is sufficient for protecting you from liability related to your business, because the goal is that for those of us that have bank accounts or personal assets or own a home, that we are not running around exposed and doing things in our business that expose those personal assets. And by incorporating a business, setting up an LLC, setting up a C corp, we're taking that necessary step to protect those personal assets. So yeah, you might have a little something to clear up there, but I don't think that it's complex, and it's probably some simple paperwork.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
So my original question for you was, I actually interim to setting up a contract with a client, and I do consulting, coaching, and consulting work. I actually volunteered to continue serving them. So we've had a completion of one contract. need to establish a new one to continue services.
Yeah.
Or do an addendum of some sort. I actually said that I would serve them at no cost until we got the new contract set up. And their financial person came back to me with a conversation about doing, now I'm losing the wording.
Is it like a master services agreement or a statement of work?
In kind.
In kind services?
Yes. And so I wasn't sure if there was some type of liability risk in that, or what I needed to do. Easy answer is get that contract completed sooner than later. So we're in contract, but I just wanted to be sure.
Totally. So, with in-kind services, usually what that means is that there's some sort of trade happening. They're paying you with other resources, whether they're doing a service back for you or compensating you in some other way, right? There can be some liability from a tax standpoint around that, right? So that is a question depending on what's trading hands and the value of it and all of that. Because if there's more than $600 trading hands or $600 in value, generally you have to send 1099s each year, right? So for example, if you're providing more than $600 in value to this company, they'd be issuing you a 1099 as a consultant. And, and so that you do want support around those kind of unique scenarios from an accountant who knows your business, knows your situation, can look at that specifically, because I can't advise on tax. It's not my specialty. While I know a thing or two about it, it's not generally where I am best utilizing my time. And so that's something where, and I always advise, like, if you're in business, you need an attorney or legal support that really knows your business, and you need an accountant that can help you grow and one that can answer questions like this for you so that you don't stay stumped, you don't slip up and make mistakes and end up, accidentally creating an audit for yourself. Right? So it's a good problem to have when you are in need of services like that, because getting connected to the right support can really help your business grow. Yeah. So I'd say, and the way to get connected to good counsel, by the way, including in the CPA accounting world, and I have a whole separate article that I wrote on this, but like what to think about when choosing an accountant. Let me just see if I can pull it up real quick, in case that would help anybody here or on the recording. As far as getting referrals, ask around, particularly from people that are like a few steps ahead of you in business, that you really like their business model, they know what they're doing, right? Just ask them, who do you work with? Who's supporting you, etc. Like, you want to understand the types of businesses that professionals are working with, so they're a fit for you, right? But also, what kind of an accountant to choose. People can get really stumped on this because, in my experience, just like there is in law and other areas, so there's the link to how to choose a CPA or an accountant for your business. You want somebody who will help you get to where you're going. And some accountants are very much backwards looking. They're looking at your current resources and telling you, like, oh, and I see this a lot. They can be very conservative as a bunch. Oh, you don't really have the resources to do that. Or no, you don't really. I mean, this drives me crazy all day long when they're talking to sole proprietors and saying, no, don't set up an LLC yet. Like, from a financial perspective, you really don't need that. And I'm like, hello, you're not the person advising them on liability for their business and what remaining a sole proprietor actually does for exposure to the rest of their assets. It's not just about conserving what you have. It's about building something that allows you to get to your version of the future, right? A bigger, more successful business. And so often I find that working with the wrong accountant can keep people playing really small. So understand who you're working with, ask them all kinds of questions that will help you understand their mindset about how they work with small businesses, and specifically how they do that strategically to be an ally for you and help you build your business, not just deliver a service that is required on an annual basis, right? You want to know specifically how they're going to help you accelerate your business.
All right.
I'm off my soapbox. Yes, I know. I get on my soapbox sometimes.
Oh,
that was
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to connect with you, Charlotte.
Bye.
All right, Robert, good to see you.
Good to see you finally.
Yes, I know. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Listen, I've got a bit of a long-winded question, so I'll try
Okay.
and frame it properly. We run an online interpreting agency that organizes events. So we're
Okay.
doing conferences, meetings,
Fabulous.
things with interpretation.
Yep.
Okay. Now it's to do with the interpretation that I have two questions. One is some of our clients record the sessions for their own personal use.
Right.
The interpreters are entitled to a fee,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for using their copyrighted interpreted material.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we're getting stuck on is that some people are saying we're only going to use it for internal use, we're not going to use it for public use, internal as in within our organization,
Yeah.
so we shouldn't be having to pay for those rights.
Mm.
I'm trying to figure out where, and even though I'm based in Europe, we have a lot of clients in the States, so
Yeah.
even if you frame it in your legal area, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay, so the question is around the use of those recordings based on the fact that you have interpreters involved and their copyright issues regarding their work. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Do you have contracts or engagements in place with those interpreters?
We do.
Okay.
But once again, there are two situations. Sometimes it goes directly through us, and sometimes the interpreters sign the contracts directly with the corporate client.
Oh, got it. Okay. So talk to me about the difference in those scenarios. When does one work through you, where you have an interpreter involved, and where does the other one happen where they're engaging an interpreter directly?
When we provide a full service from A to Z, then we will go and provide everything that's
Including the
involved
interpreter.
including the interpreters. And sometimes the organizations have their own interpreters. They just need the service to go online and organize the event, and they come to us with their own interpreters then.
So when they come to you with their own interpreters, that's on them to handle, right?
Absolutely.
So hopefully you're not involved in those discussions at all between them and the interpreter. So it sounds like the issue is when they come to you for the full service, what are they getting in regards to copyrights involving the interpreter? So my question for you is, in those scenarios, what does your engagement agreement say as between you and the interpreter?
We have a statement that we replicate in the contract with the interpreters and with the company that we're providing the service to, and it effectively says that if the recording is if we record the event with interpretation, then there will be an additional fee of X%. That is the copyright fees for the interpreters.
Got it. So one way around this, if you're open to this, is, and how much does that fee tend to make or break a contract? Like when a company sees that fee, do they just go, oh, okay, we're not doing this?
It's usually around 30% higher than the normal
Than the
fee.
standard the interpreter fee.
So it is a deal breaker sometimes, yes.
Oh, it is. Okay, interesting. Because one of the things that I would say is just assume in modern times that everybody wants the recording and build that fee in up front. Don't make it optional. I would not, if it was my business, I would build it in and I would include the copyrights to it. And that's why it's also partly a discussion to have with the interpreter is obviously you want it to be a win-win-win for everybody. The interpreter gets paid more, you get paid a little bit more on the contract, and the client gets the benefit of the full recording and the uses associated with that. But I would just build that in at a higher fee and have that be your standard fee. Just say, look, we are a full service client. We do all this stuff. And the other question I have is on and I'm not sure how your invoicing or your proposal system works. Are you breaking down every component of the service? So if you're doing a full service online event that includes interpretation, are are you breaking down like 20 line items of how, like where all the costs are coming from? Talk to me about what the client sees, either from a proposal or an engagement perspective.
We usually summarize it into 3 groups.
Okay.
One is the actual technical support and
Yep.
technical issues and marketing that goes in to setting up the event. The second is the actual event proper, in which we're participating, helping
Managing
people getting
everything.
online, managing
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
And then the third part is all of the post-production
Yep.
stuff.
Okay, got it. So it's kind of by phase. So depending on how many line items are necessary for them to see, because I think they probably wanted an overall general idea of costs. But if I were you, I would try to actually remove some of those line items. So, because what I've found is that if you give people the opportunity to nitpick, they will. If you otherwise just say, here's my standard pricing, it's full service, this is what it includes, like take it or leave it, you get a better quality customer that doesn't nitpick you. And when you start to line item everything, people begin to think like, oh, maybe I'll have a little wiggle room if we remove that, or we get them to, budge on that. And my response is no. It's your business. I want you to run it in a way that feels good, that takes care of your people and provides the absolute best value for your client. So it's up to you to decide what does that look like. But I think you could create a scenario where people are happier and you get less pushback on that by automatically including that copyright fee in the service for your interpreters and just saying that's our standard fee. We want a full service product, including the ability for our companies and our clients to be able to use those recordings on the back end. And this is how we accomplish that.
Okay, I know that in France, that's the way we work when we sign contracts in France. However, in the other parts of Europe, they tend to want to break down and
interesting. So you've got some cultural differences, just based on how people engage in that contract.
Okay. The other question that I have, if I can, is that okay?
Totally.
We have a Zoom meeting here, and setting up the Zoom meeting, you also have the options you get the people who are signing up for an event, you get their permission to send out certain information to them. Now
And are you doing that through the Zoom registration process?
That's where the question comes, because
okay.
There are 2 scenarios over here. One is when we do it through the Zoom registration process, and one is because the Zoom registration process is somewhat limited in terms of language abilities, and we're doing multi-language events, we pull that out and put it into a third-party
like
piece
a landing
of software.
page. Yeah,
it's a third-party piece of software.
Got
Something like MailChimp, but it's a different one that we use. And obviously then the email is not coming from Zoom, where you usually have the permission. It's coming from the third party, so we have to include that they're giving that third party the permission. But the question is, when does the follow-up actually end legally? Because once the event is over, you have the option of sending a thank you for participating, or sorry you missed the event, here's a recording of it, or come to our next event. But how far can you push that in terms of not becoming spam and still being within the permissions granted to you to run the event?
Yeah, it's a great question. And a lot of it has to do with what was their understanding at the point that they signed on, right? So for example, if you had this third-party software system, hopefully it's built in, like from a functionality perspective, you can build it into a basic, like MailChimp, into a basic landing page where you provide those disclosures. What I would want your disclosures to say are that you are giving permission not only to Zoom to collect this information so you can participate in, the event, but also to XYZ company or, even yourself that is running the event, operating the event, right? And, and then alongside that saying, we will be notifying you of all things related to the event, including providing recordings and follow-up. The question becomes, do you have a separate opt-in that allows them to check the box and continue to hear from you in regards to any other thing. So if it's all strictly related to the event follow-up, I would say you're probably, so long as it's not like a year later, it's outrageously, set apart from a timeline perspective, you're probably okay. It's a good question to be asking, because under the GDPR, if you are collecting any data from people, you have to have a reason to be in communication with them, right? Can't be willy-nilly. And if they registered for an event a year ago and what you're doing now is totally different and apart, like, you'd probably need to get a new consent or new opt-in, right, to confirm that, or have at least recent engagement where they want to continue to hear from you. There is a timeliness factor with GDPR that did not exist before. It used to be more data is better, and I'm going to keep you in my database for 20 years. And, people now obviously have the right to opt out, and we need to be honoring all of those rights. But I would say, be reasonable. Consider what a reasonable person is going to be thinking when they sign up for the event. I mean, is something 2 weeks after the event going to shock people? Probably not, right? Is something 6 months later going to be offensive? Maybe, right? So, best you can make clear disclosures on the sign up page. And if you're trying to, because one of the questions I have from companies that do this, like co-host events or create something together, is like, can we use this information for our future marketing, for what we're doing in our business? Separate question, I think, than what you've just asked. But again, that gets down to what were the disclosures made at the point of opt-in. So much of it has to do with what was in the mind of the consumer when they signed up for this event or this list, right? And if you say, you are also agreeing that we send you future marketing materials or our weekly newsletter or whatever, it needs to be a clear disclosure, and they need to have the option to opt into that or not. Mm-hmm. That makes sense?
That makes perfect sense. And that's quite clear. But when I focus in and see the feedback that we're getting from the market, is that some of our clients want to say, thank you for attending. You may also want to attend this, and this event, and you can also sign up for our newsletter here.
Yes, totally. No, and that's actually, this is a good point. Can you give Mommy just a few more minutes and I'll come up and make you lunch? I know, you're being so patient. Mommy's almost done, okay? I'll be up in a few minutes.
So I feel being guilty now.
No, that's okay.
She's not getting lunch because of us.
No, it's all right. We're 4 and we're hungry all the time. So we've had breakfast, we've had a snack, and now we're hungry for lunch. We're good. She's not starving. So the question that do you engage outside of these events? Are you doing additional marketing services for any of these companies? Okay.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So this is a great question, because there are a couple ways you can approach this. And this is a conversation for you to have as well with each of your clients where you're doing these services for them. You can have opt-ins at the front that are like multi-option opt-ins, right? I agree for all to hear all, communications related to the event. Yes, I also want to sign up for your newsletter or future marketing services, right? You can do that right at the point of opt-in. And some people may say no, they only want to hear about the event stuff. And then that said, it still is not against the law. Like, I don't think you would be outside of bounds to, in that final wrap-up email where you're delivering the recording or whatever, saying thank you. By the way, here's the next really exciting thing we're doing, right? And giving them another chance to opt in. So that can be a very successful strategy if you didn't catch them on the front end, right? But if they don't, that's where you'd want to be really clear that you probably should not continue to randomly mail those people if they did not provide their consent.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Good question. Very thoughtful question. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else from you, Robert, or Charlotte, or Scott? And if not, we'll go to Kathleen, who's been patient with her hand up. Awesome. Kathleen, if you're there, you're welcome to pop in and say hi. Hi there.
Hello. I was going to ask you something, and now I just cannot remember. I dialed in. See, I thought to myself, I have it here on my calendar, but I couldn't remember if I set it up for once a month. Because, it used to be every week.
Right.
And so I checked and saw after I came in, and I thought he doesn't have to check.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, well, no worries. Glad that you could be here. It's okay that you don't have a question. There's always so much to learn
Well,
from
I
other people.
had one, but my brain is, I'm not really, this is what, I'm in a situation where I was planning to be grocery shopping, but the transportation wasn't there.
Got it. No, I totally
And it's
hear you.
like, I came back and then I said, well, what am I supposed to be doing? What do I have on my calendar?
And your calendar took over. Well, good to have you, Kathleen. I'm gonna if you don't have a question, that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up the call just out of respect for people's time and also the recording. Anybody else? Any final questions, feedback, thoughts? We're good.
I still need to get with you at some point, Heather, if I can. The program that you offered just before pandemic, when we were in San Diego together,
Yeah.
somehow just with pandemic and everything, I never got to be on your calls or anything with that. So I
Got
don't
it.
know.
And I forget, did you purchase? You purchased in and then you just didn't participate. Okay.
But we
Retail.
can do that separately.
Yeah, totally. But it's super easy to do because all that content lives online. So if you want to drop me an email whenever you're ready, I'll reshoot you the links and it's super easy to go through. I've had loads of people go through just the recording since that time. Like they didn't participate live either. And I've gotten excellent feedback about it. So all you have to do, this is what we're talking about, you guys, is the website protection package. I made a huge push last year to get online businesses protected. And Scott, that website protection package, if you schedule, like look at your calendar, the best thing to do is get it scheduled because then you actually do it. It will literally only take you 3 to 4 hours. That's how long the workshop was. You just have your documents ready and I provide all the download links. And then you walk through them alongside the training and you're done. And you know how to plug them in. You're going to feel so empowered and it literally takes a morning. You just put it on your schedule somewhere and then you'll get your online business all buttoned up.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Is there a pattern to these calls? Because
what was that? A pattern? Yeah. So my Ask Me Anything calls, Ask Me Anything live. Kathleen was right. Last year they were weekly. That was because COVID hit, and I was making a huge effort to get small businesses online and get them protected. This year they're monthly, so they're the second Monday of every month at 11 a.m. Pacific.
Okay.
Okay.
Usually
So-
when I've seen it was after the fact. So.
Totally. Yeah. So if you're on my list, you'll get the notifications. I tell people if you unsubscribe, you won't. I don't want any spammers. And so I don't actually share the login, even though this is an open call. I don't share it anywhere online. You have to be on my list to be invited. And so, yeah, so just stay on my list and then you'll get the reminders. But, you know, you can go ahead and calendar it if you have future questions and you just want to be able to pop in. Second, yes, you can, sweetie pie. We're helping ourselves now to popsicles. Mommy didn't come up soon enough. I love a strong girl that has a mind of her own. So I'll be up in a minute and we'll make it a real lunch.
Bite out of it.
It already has a bite out of it? I don't think so. It just melted weird. So yeah, Scott, just put those on your calendar, second Monday of every month, 11 a.m. Pacific, and that'll be super easy.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
It was great to see you. Thank you, Heather.
Good to see you, Scott. I hope you're doing well. Good to see you, Charlotte. Robert, great to connect with you. I know we've been LinkedIn buddies for a while. Kathleen, take good care, and maybe we'll see you next month.
I just thought of a question.
Okay.
My question,
One of those days where you just need more coffee. I feel that.
yeah, well, I don't drink coffee, but yeah, it was a real easy question and I can't remember it again. Okay, I'll send an email if I
That's
think of
fine.
it.
Email's great. All right,
It
Kathleen.
was a real easy question. It was just like, anyway, but I can't remember.
It'll come
All
back
right.
to you. Just pop it over to me in an email.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. Have a great week and a good month, and we'll see you next month. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.